Now, united in arms with new allies against a common foe, mankind stands at the shores of destiny and awaits the coming of the Tides of Darkness.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Seth.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.
Wow. Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Another day, another dollar, as they say, and as we often say as well.
No, we say what a day, what a dollar.
No, that's what you say.
You literally said it in the last episode.
Oh, did I? All right. Well, anyway, I heard from the producer. He said that he
hates us.
Yes, and that he was looking to give himself a raise, and we agreed to give him a 2% raise. I mean, 2% of nothing is still nothing.
That's right.
Well, anyway, Zach, have you been playing anything recently?
Yes, recently I've been playing Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Sega Master System. Released back in 1992 in Europe and on the Game Gear in the United States and Japan. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Master System and the Game Gear, despite its name, is not a version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Genesis. The 8-bit Sonic games, while obviously inspired by the Genesis versions, are basically their own games, and Sonic 2 for the Master System is notable as it has 0 levels from the Genesis version, unlike Sonic 1 for the Master System, which has Green Hill Zone, Labyrinth Zone, and Scrap Brain. But Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Master System is pretty neat. I picked up a copy of both games at a vinyl swap meet of all places. I was at a vinyl swap meet and I walked up to a table that had some video games and I was looking at their table and I said, oh, they have some Master System games. That's always fun. And then I saw Sonic the Hedgehog. I was like, oh, they have Sonic the Hedgehog for the Master System. And then I saw next to it Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And I said, oh, they have Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Master System. So I bought them immediately because, well, Sonic the Hedgehog 1 had a limited release in America on the Master System to the point where it's a very expensive game to find. And Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was never released on the Master System in the United States. So it's not common to find them here. I've never actually found them before, and they are for a really good price. They were like $20 a pop. So I bought both. And yeah, I'm happy to have them. They're complete in box with the manual and the cartridges. So I've been playing them on my analog Mega SG, which can play Master System games with a special adapter. And yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is fun. I've played the Game Gear version before. I actually owned the Game Gear version back as a child. And it's a tough game. It was especially tough on the Game Gear because of the limited screen size. But it's even tougher on the Master System because it's just a tough game. I can get further than I could on the Game Gear version, but the game definitely doesn't hold your hand, I would say. I got to one zone and I had like 9 lives and I was like, oh, I'm in the gold. And I was on Act 3 of a certain zone, and when you're on Act 3, you'd get no rings, and I just kept dying and dying and dying, and I got a game over, and I was very sad because I was doing pretty good. But yeah, that's Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Master System. Kind of a cool little thing to find. I'm happy I have it, and it fills out my collection of Sonic games that I have.
Now, is this the same swap meet that you got my D&D modules from?
It is the same swap meet I got your D&D modules from.
Well, that's fun. Are my D&D modules getting taken well care of?
I think I put them with your other gifts. Well, Seth, what about you? What have you been recently playing?
So recently I've been playing a game called Bookwalker. It was released in June of 2023 and is developed by Do My Best and published by Tiny Build. It's a narrative adventure game, of course it is, where you play as a guy by the name of Ettany Quist, who is a writer and is shackled from being able to write, and so has to become a thief to steal things from books in order to be able to get somebody to release the shackles from his serving. For some reason, he's so the game is set in this like dystopia world where people are living in like this like multi-company housing type deal, and your character is a writer, and writers in the world can make a lot of money because people can go into books and experience books like firsthand. However, writers can change books, whether their books are not their books, and this writer you play as can't really change books because of being shackled, but he can do a little bit of changing of books. And what's cool is that the game plays in first person when you are in the real world, but then when you go into the book world, it plays in like an isometric third person view, and it's got like turn-based combat when you fight like weird book creatures, and you explore the books and try to steal items, and then you're given choices to steal an item or maybe steal like half of an item, because you run into characters, and the characters sometimes are like, you feel bad for them, but they're also book characters. So like you also have like a mission that you're trying to accomplish. So like it's interesting, and it gives you a little bit of a moral kind of choice throughout the game as well. But yeah, it's really fun. I think I played it during an X Fest and checked it out then, and I really like those Steam's Next Fests. I think they're kind of cool addition. I hope we get a lot more of those. But I like being able to check out demos and just explore new games, and I think this was one of them. And it was a lot of fun. And then I was looking for a game to play on my Steam Deck, and this fit the cake.
Fit the cake?
Fit the cake. Fit the
bill? Fit the cake does not sound right to me.
I don't know. It met the criteria of what I was trying to do.
It met the criteria. It did what it needed to do.
So that's Bookwalker, available on Steam, and I don't think it's that entirely expensive.
Bookwalker, Texas Ranger.
You can pick it up on Steam for like $15.
Well, getting into today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about a game that's near and dear to Seth and my heart. And that game is, as the episode is titled, it is Warcraft II, Tides of Darkness. So before we get into the history of Warcraft II, Seth, do you have any memories of Warcraft II?
I remember, I think the first time playing Warcraft II, I was in a location that was like a nebulous friend house. Like those houses that you really can't recall who you were visiting or who they were or what the house really looked like. You just knew they had some video games that you liked.
Yeah, it's a lot of family friends of ours. A lot of people that mom took me to.
Yeah, you don't really remember whose house it was or what it looked like, but you remember they had Warcraft II. And that's where I think I played Warcraft II for the first time. And then I'm pretty sure that we got Warcraft II because we had the original Warcraft, because Classic Dad loves real-time strategy.
That's true.
Including Warcraft 2, and Stronghold.
Yeah, he's a big fan of those games.
I believe he's beaten at least Warcraft or Warcraft 2 without cheats. I don't know, but
yeah, glittering prizes.
He loves cheats in the RTSs.
Yeah,
but yeah, and I also remember this was the time when you can get a lot of Blizzard games for cheap.
Our copy of Warcraft 2 was incredibly cheap because it was a CDR.
Yeah, from a legitimate copy source. I mean, at the end of the day, I did at least buy the Blizzard battle chest, I want to say like 15 times.
We definitely probably paid for our way through Blizzard over the years. In fact, I gave Blizzard money literally today. But yeah, my memories, I remember we had a burned copy of Warcraft 2. It was a white CDR. It had green ink on it. It said Warcraft 2 Tides of Darkness, or it said War 2 Tides of Darkness, I think. And yeah, I just have great memories of playing it. I remember spending a lot of time with the map maker. I used to create these pretty crappy maps where you would have like your army on one side of the map and the enemy would be on the other side, and there'd be a river separating them or like a bunch of rocks, and you could just kind of like build as much as you want because the enemy would be too stupid to know what to do, and then you just go over and wipe them out. I remember also one time Dad grounded me. I forget what I did. I think it might have been when I threw the rock at you in the car.
I don't even remember that.
We were on vacation and I found a cool rock, and I was like holding it, and you like kept trying to take it from me, so I chucked it at you. Nice. And Dad got mad and I got grounded for like a week or two.
That sounds about right.
When I was grounded, I couldn't play video games, so I drew the maps I wanted to make in a notebook Like, I literally drew out these Warcraft 2 maps that I wanted to design. I never designed them, but I had them drawn of
Nice.
like...
Do you still have them drawn?
I don't know. I should go looking for them. They might be in like mom's bin of childhood wonders.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just remember drawing these Warcraft 2 maps. There's also a really strong possibility some of the maps I created are on our father's Aptiva, because I played a lot of Warcraft 2 on that computer, and I definitely saved the maps I made. They're possibly still around. If I could get that Aptiva booted and get into the hard drive, I would definitely go searching for them. And as I alluded to just a moment ago, there are some cheats I of course remember by heart. Glittering prizes gives you a bunch of gold. Show path clears the fog of war, and It Is a Good Day to Die will give you not only invincibility but also one-hit kills, and also Make It So speeds up building and resource gathering. Warcraft 2 is a very memorable game for me. It's where I learned the word damn for the first time. That's a fun fact, because there's the Temple of the Damned, and I was like, that's a word. And I think I said it, and I think either you or Sarah was like, you can't say that word. It's a cuss.
It's a cuss.
I don't know if you guys called it a cuss, but you did say it was a bad word.
I hope we called it a cuss. Hot damn, that's a bad word.
Well, to get us into today's episode, in terms of the history of Warcraft 2, we covered Warcraft Orcs and Humans way back in episode 17.
Sometimes Blizzard's a crappy company, so they don't get our extra publicity.
They don't, no. But we did also talk about StarCraft before. We've talked about Diablo before. But when we did talk about Warcraft Orcs and Humans, I honestly don't know how much detail we did on Blizzard. So you might hear some stories about Blizzard today from their founding that you've already heard, but that's just because it's been a while. And just as a note, this month, November, is Warcraft's 30th anniversary. Warcraft Orcs and Humans came out in November of 1994, which was 30 years ago. So what better way to revisit Warcraft's history than by talking about the sequel that has its 30th anniversary next year?
Yes, Blizzard was really good at churning out games.
They sure were. But yeah, the company that would eventually become Blizzard was founded as Silicon and Synapse back in February of 1991 by Michael Morhaime, Alan Adham, and Frank Pierce. They graduated from University of California together and immediately went into the development of a game company. They wanted to create video games fresh out of college. To start the company, the team contributed $10,000 a person, with Morhaime apparently borrowing the money from his grandmother, interest-free. I like that the note I was reading said interest-free, which implied that the automatic assumption is that his grandmother would have charged him interest.
I mean, should have.
Now, Silicon and Synapse's first games were ports. They were actually able to establish a connection in the industry thanks to Alan Adham being friends with Brian Fargo, the founder of Interplay. Their first actual game that they would produce that wasn't a port was RPM Racing for the Super Nintendo, which did well enough to earn a sequel, Rock and Roll Racing, also for the Super Nintendo, and then they would eventually release the game The Lost Vikings in 1993. And we've talked about The Lost Vikings before. That was actually a retro rewind Seth had me play at one point.
Yeah, it's actually a really good game.
Yeah, it's a fun game. It's kind of like Lemmings, but you play as Vikings, and you kind of have different abilities as each Viking.
Yeah, and they're not as dumb as Lemmings.
They're not, but it's a similar, like, you have to get from point A to point B, basically. Right. In 1993, Silicon and Synapse would change their name to Chaos Studios, and the reason being was that Alan Adham noticed that their company was getting confused by people due to the fact that their name had Silicon in it, and people assumed they meant breast implants. So he said, we might want to change our name because people think we're a different company.
Yeah, and they might end up like Peter Molyneux in the Baked Beans.
Yeah, but in a different direction.
Silicon and Synapse, now Chaos Studios, would go on to make video games. They would begin working on another new game, largely inspired by long hours playing Dune 2, made by Westwood Studios. Well, I'll actually talk about Westwood Studios just a little bit for my retro rewind. Because this was the era when companies made games for a variety of things just to try and get money, versus nowadays where a company makes one game that's ported to multiple game systems. Back then, companies would just make multiple different types of games depending on the system. But yeah, so the team was really enjoying Dune 2, and they wanted to make a strategy game similar to Dune 2, but set in a high fantasy setting instead of Dune. And the team also wanted to cement the game as the first in a series of strategy strategy games under a common banner, inspired by the same thing that SSI did with the Gold Box games. So they came up with a banner called Warcraft, and their first game in this new series would be Warcraft: Orcs and Humans. Inspiration on the art and design of Warcraft came from a few places. The team was already familiar with things like Lord of the Rings, but they also pulled from the art style of Warhammer, and they would do that again for a different series called StarCraft. They are actually very good at taking from Warhammer, so good enough that sometimes they get into fights with Warhammer. But as mentioned, the gameplay was largely inspired by Dune 2, but also from the RTS game Herzog Zwei, which we actually covered in another episode.
Yeah, we did a whole episode on Herzog Zwei.
Yeah, it's a fun novel game for the Sega Genesis. Now, development was costly, but Davidson and Associates, who primarily put out educational software, contacted the team with an offer to buy their company for $4 million. They rejected the offer, which was met by another offer of $6.75 million, and allowing them to retain full creative control over all the games they developed. And they were like, all right, that's fine. That works. And they accepted that. So after accepting the sale, they were contacted by a company called Chaos Technologies, who asked for $100,000 to allow the studio to continue using the name Chaos Studios, which I feel like is a little bit like extortion. But they instead changed their name to Ogre Studios because they didn't care. They did so in April of 1994, and then finally in May of 1994, they changed it to Blizzard Entertainment. Davidson and Associates reportedly did not like the name Ogre Studios, hence the quick change to Blizzard Entertainment. And since Davidson and Associates owned them, they did have to kind of listen to them when it came to naming of
Yes.
the business.
They said they could have full creative control of the games they developed, not the name of their company.
That's right. The name Blizzard was decided upon by skimming through the dictionary and sending names they liked to the legal department. Blizzard was the first one that was cleared.
Now, in November of 1994, Warcraft Orcs and Humans hit the shelves and was an instant success. It sold 300,000 copies in its initial time on the market, with 100,000 being sold within the first year. The game was also a critical success, with people praising the overall gameplay and fantasy setting. Warcraft II development began quickly after the release of Orcs and Humans. Initially, the plan was to make a game called Warcraft Vietnam, or a similar game where you would control fighter pilots and fight dragons. So they had this idea for Warcraft Vietnam, and then they were like, well, what if we took like modern elements and mixed them with fantasy elements? So you had like fighter pilots fighting dragons and stuff. And then they thought about taking the game into space, and they were like, we could do Warcraft Space. And they're like, no, that's dumb. We'll decide to do that later. And eventually they decided to just stick with fantasy.
But they did go back to space.
They did go back to space, but we never went to Vietnam. The reason they ended up staying with the fantasy setting was they realized that the fantasy genre was a rich area to explore, and one they really didn't need to stray away from to keep their games original. So they were like, yeah, we've done fantasy before, but there's more to fantasy than just what we've done. And like in Warcraft Orcs and Humans, there aren't dragons, there aren't, trolls, there aren't goblins. There are ogres, but they aren't controllable, they're just enemies. So they thought they could take some of these elements and make them now playable or usable. They got to work on Warcraft 2 and started implementing changes. One of the major changes from Warcraft 1 to Warcraft 2 would be in its scale. Literally, the size of the map, the size of the graphics. In an article from GameDeveloper.com, Dwayne Stinnett, an artist at Blizzard, talked about how they doubled the resolution of the game so that the sprites could be far more detailed. Reportedly, he originally wanted to make realistic sprite designs. In fact, he had designed some realistic sprites that were playable in-game and that he was working with. But members of the team came to him and said, we want it more cartoony. And in protest, he turned the shaders all the way up to max and sent it back to them, and they said, perfect. Now, upping the resolution in such a way was tough. One problem with upping your resolution on a game is now computers had to struggle with that upscaled resolution. And they ended up having to stick with Super VGA graphics, which were at the time a standard, but limited.
Gameplay changes were made between the first and second game that overall were done to improve the quality of life. Roads, which were required for the first game, were removed. Thank goodness. This offered a bit more freedom in how players could build out their base. You could just drop things anywhere old places could be, and you didn't have to build roads connecting everyone. And that's truly when Warcraft stopped being some sort of pseudo city builder and started being an RTS. This also allowed for the creation of sentry towers and cannon towers that could be placed in strategic areas to ward off potential invaders, because you were not held off by roads. Arguably, if you had a long enough road, you could get that sentry tower as far away as you could. It's kind of like doing the Protoss tower defense, where you just make towers all the way down.
Oh, yeah.
They also changed how the fog of war functioned in the game, where the fog kind of rolls back after the player explores the area, and the last thing that they see is essentially frozen. So you could reveal the map, see where the enemy base is, and then head back, and it will get like a light gray covering so that you can still see that the enemy base is there, but you don't see what the enemy is doing. So it is an updated to its strategy to the game. So you kind of get a general idea of where the base is when you scout, but without the knowledge of changes you made if you lost that scout while scouting.
Yeah. For example, the Ogre Magi is able to summon a Eye of Kilrog, which is a short scout that has a limited life. You can send it over a base and kind of do a whole little scouting routine. And when it dies, you lose that vision, but you still get that gray fog of war that Seth was describing. So you can still kind of see the enemy base. The one thing you can't see, though, is when they build new buildings or upgrade anything or start building an army.
Now, another change to Warcraft II, and it was a big one, was an entirely new resource. Oil was added. Because there was now seafaring vessels and naval combat. So you could now build battleships, destroyers, submarines, and transport ships, and the addition of naval combat meant that maps could be more diverse, with islands and archipelago maps now being a new option, because you could essentially transport people across water. Now, along with naval ships, there were also flying units. Dragons and griffins are now trainable as combat flying units, and zeppelins and helicopters could be created to scout an area. Helicopters for the Alliance, or the human side, as it were. Though we say the Alliance now because arguably only like 2 of the units are humans and the rest are different races.
Yeah.
So like the helicopters are in fact piloted by dwarves, I think. And then zeppelins are goblins. On the orc side, I think we always call them, the Horde.
They're the Horde, yeah.
And then some of the other changes include the consolidation of a couple of units. The Cleric unit from Warcraft Orcs and Human was now put into an upgradable Paladin class for the Knights, and Peasants and Peons were given a weak, but effective in numbers, attack that could be used as the last resort, before they would just have to flee. Archers and Troll Axe Throwers could now be upgraded to Rangers and Berserkers, giving them improved range, damage, and other upgrades. And in this, Warcraft 2 kind of really started character upgrades for them.
Yeah, and we'll talk a bit about that. You can now do tech trees, the type of upgrades and stuff that you find with almost all real-time strategy games now.
Yeah, and to the point where also like main RPG characters type of like in Warcraft 3, it'll be definitely like the hero units is kind of like an offshoot of what was done in Warcraft 2.
Now, certain units in Warcraft 2 from Warcraft 1 were either scrapped or redesigned completely. For example, on the orc side of things, the Necromancer and Warlock from Warcraft Orcs and Humans were removed. They were replaced with the Death Knight and the Ogre Magi. Humans also lost their catapult but gained a ballista, and all of these changes are actually followed up with story beats. The orcs, as Seth alluded to, are now the Horde, as it includes more than just orcs. It's ogres, trolls, goblins, and dragons. And the humans formed the Alliance, which includes elves, dwarves, and gnomes. Another change to the game was the addition of tech trees, as I was just talking about. When you start a game, you start with a basic structure, but after building certain structures and getting certain number of resources, you can upgrade your Great Hall into a stronghold and then to a fortress if you're playing as the Horde, or a town hall into a keep and then to a castle if you're playing as the Alliance. These upgrades will unlock more advanced buildings and additional upgrades that could be researched at places like blacksmiths or lumber mills. Warcraft II Tides of Darkness was released in December of 1995, meaning next year, December of 2025 will be Warcraft Tides of Darkness's 30th anniversary. Now, Warcraft II Tides of Darkness, as we'll get into, was a big success, and we'll get a bit more into detail on how big of a success it was. But because it was a success, Blizzard decided they were going to move on to their next game, StarCraft. However, they didn't want to leave leave Warcraft behind. It was making money, so it would be kind of dumb to just ignore this big money maker they have. So they decided to reach out to a company called Cyberlore Studios to develop an expansion pack.
Now, Cyberlore previously was involved with the development of some SSI games, specifically Al-Qadim, The Genie's Curse, and Entomorph, Plague of the Darkfall. They brought with them some experience working on story-focused role-playing games, which can be seen in the expansion pack they started to develop, Warcraft II Beyond the Dark Portal. When Blizzard reached out to Cyberlore to check in with them during one of their milestone periods, they realized that Cyberlore was nowhere near along the development path that Blizzard envisioned that they would be, so they canceled the contract and took the development in-house. Beyond the Dark Portal would go on to release in May of 1996 because Blizzard's like, this is how you get a game out, and contain 2 brand new orc and human campaigns and a new hero unit, the evolution of the Warcraft 3 hero unit, which eventually evolves into like Dota and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
A console version of Warcraft 2, Tides of Darkness, and Beyond the Dark Portal would go on to get released in August of 1997 under the name Warcraft 2, The Dark Saga, for the PlayStation and Sega Saturn. The port would be developed by Climax and published by EA. The port was not a one-for-one, as some additional quality of life changes were made to accommodate for a console. These changes included the ability to automate upgrades in unit production and selecting more troops than the original version, because navigating a RTS landscape with a controller stinks.
Oh yeah, it's bad.
So you either have to have like a ship like Hershok Zhao that just flies around, or you have to be able to automate some things. In 1999, Blizzard would port the game to Windows and release Warcraft II Battle.net Edition, which would come bundled with the Battle.net service for multiplayer use. They also added some enhancements that they borrowed from StarCraft, such as a hotkey to center on specific events, assigning numbers to the groups of units, and the ability to double-click a unit to select all of the specific types. So like a secret little upgrade with multiplayer.
Now, in terms of the story and the gameplay, like the first game, Warcraft II Tides of Darkness is a real-time strategy game. You take control of either the Alliance or the Horde, and you must build out a base and defeat an enemy. During the campaign, you are given specific objectives. Bring a certain unit to a part of the map, survive for X amount of time, build X number of buildings, destroy a specific object, or kill a specific unit. You do get certain objectives, but when you're playing as just a custom map against, an AI or your friend, the objective is to build your base, kill the enemy. To do this, you build an army by mining gold, chopping trees, and dredging up oil. The story of Warcraft 2 is set after the canon ending of Warcraft Orcs and Humans, which is the Orc campaign. So the Orc campaign of Orcs and Humans is the canon ending. The human campaign is non-canon. The only reason I clarify that is because the human campaign involves you wiping out Blackrock Spire, which has not fallen in the Warcraft 2 campaign story. So at the end of Warcraft 1, Stormwind Keep, the once capital of the Kingdom of Azeroth, has been decimated, and the humans are retreating to the Kingdom of Lordaeron. The former Azeroth humans unite with the Kingdom of Lordaeron forces, but also the elves of Quel'Thalas, the dwarves, and the gnomes, thus forming an alliance. And this new alliance they create is able to start pushing back against the orcs, back to the lands of Azeroth, to discover and destroy the source of the orcs. The orcs, meanwhile, have also landed on Lordaeron, and have joined forces with the woodland trolls who follow troll leader Zul'jin, the ogres, and the goblins. They also start working with dragons, so you can have dragons, and there is a power struggle within the orcish command structure that you literally read about as this events play out. And at one point, a bunch of orcs decide that they're going to turn their faith to a necromancer named Gul'dan and his ogre magi ally Cho'Gall, to the point where there's actually a mission in Warcraft 2 when you're playing as the orcs where you have to go and kill Gul'dan. The Alliance campaign is primarily tasked with the destruction of the Dark Portal, which is the portal used to enter the world of Azeroth from the orcs' homeworld of Draenor. Orc campaign is about conquering Lordaeron and destroying the humans' capital in Lordaeron, as well as the scouring of Quel'Thalas, the elven capital. Beyond the Dark Portal takes place fairly soon after the events of Tides of Darkness. The Alliance travels to Draenor, led by the wizard Khadgar, and meanwhile, an orcish shaman named Ner'zhul is tasked with stealing the spellbook of the wizard Medivh to create more portals. And what's fun about Beyond the Dark Portal is this character of Khadgar would actually show up in the Warcraft movie, which is always great. The Warcraft movie pulls a bit from Warcraft 1 and Warcraft 2 in terms of lore. So you have Lothar from both the first and the second game, and you have Khadgar, and you have Medivh, and you have Algrim Doomhammer, and Gul'dan, and such. So it's fun. It's a bad movie, but it's fun. Seth, do you want to tell us how Warcraft 2 did, though?
Sure. Warcraft II Tides of Darkness was a massive success, with one report from PC Data putting it being number 2 in the sales charts in December of 1995, just behind Myst. It held this spot until January of 1996 and dropped to number 3 in February. By November of 1995, it still held on to the number 5 slot, and within 3 months of release, the game had sold upwards of 500,000 units. By November of the same year, it had sold 1.2 million worldwide. It had also made a ton of money, with estimates around $34.5 million, or about $70.5 million today, being made within the first year of the US alone. Now, to celebrate the success, Blizzard would release Warcraft Battle Chest in November of 1996, and would continue to release Warcraft Battle Chest every year for the remainder of life, up until today, when they released Warcraft Battle Chest.
Yeah.
In 2024. And now, the Warcraft Battle Chest that came out in 1996 was bundling the release of Warcraft Orcs and Humans and Beyond the Dark Portal. This would be a great decision because the Battle Chest itself would rank at number 6 on the PC Data's monthly sales by January of 1997 and would sell upward of 263,000 units. Some of those units, they already sold to the people who already bought it, because people just have a habit of buying Battle Chests over and over again, like I just did. By 1998, the game reached 2 million global sales, and in 2001, it reached 3 million global sales. Critics also loved the game, with Computer Gaming World giving it a 4.5 out of 5 stars, GameSpot giving it a 93%, and Next Generation giving it 5 stars. Critics praised the control system and the ability to select multiple units at once, the design of different maps, the various strategies players could employ, the fog of war, and so on and so on. Beyond the Dark Portal scored about the same, with GameSpot giving it a 92%, Game Revolution giving it a 4 out of 5 stars, and All Game Guide also giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. And they hit the market at the right time. When Warcraft came out, either because of Warcraft coming out or because Warcraft came out at a good time, the world was stoked with RTS. Everyone played RTSs. The genres ebb and flow as time goes on. I don't think RTSs are super high right now, but they're still out there.
So there was a period, I would say the past 10, maybe 15 or so years, where just not a lot were coming out. And you had a lot of these like revival RTSs, I would say, like 8-bit armies and 8-bit hordes, which kind of take the RTS themes that you remember from games like Warcraft and Command & Conquer and revitalize them for a modern audience. Now you have games like Stormgate that just came out by some of the former devs of StarCraft. You have like Command & Conquer Remastered. You have the Warcraft Remastered releases, which we're going to talk about in a second. So yeah, it's, I think it is a new era of people who are getting into real-time strategy games and enjoying them. Now, with Warcraft 2's legacy, of course, Warcraft 2 would be followed up by Warcraft 3, Reign of Chaos, which brought this series into 3D. However, I'm not going to talk too much about Reign of Chaos because that game is over 20 years old. It came out in 2002, so it's definitely time that it got its own episode. Now, outside of official games, there were some non-canon campaigns put out by companies like WizardWorks. They published W! Zone and W! Zone Retribution, which were approved by Blizzard, but the storylines they were crafting in these campaigns were non-canon. Others would release non-canon campaigns, but they wouldn't get approved by Blizzard. For example, Aztec Armory's campaigns for Warcraft 2, which was an unauthorized campaign pack that was sold in stores. Infamously, GSC Game World, who later on would produce the games Cossacks and Stalker, would release Warcraft 2000 Nuclear Epidemic in an unfinished state in 1999. We talked a bit about their game in our Stalker episode, but as a reminder, GSC Game World was a Ukrainian developer who attempted to make their own version of Warcraft 3 by taking assets of Warcraft 2 and building out an RTS. And they would actually send this idea to Blizzard and say, let us make Warcraft 3 for you. And Blizzard said, no thank you. And Warcraft 2000 Nuclear Epidemic would end up getting leaked and would hit the streets, I guess, of Ukraine and Eastern Europe. Warcraft 2000 Nuclear Epidemic feels like Warcraft 2, but with larger maps, higher resolutions, the ability to have armies as large as 8,000 units, the ability to select more than 9 units at once, and by that I mean pretty sure you can select all 8,000 units and just get them marching, and also aliens and nukes. The two things Warcraft was missing. A fan remake of Warcraft 2 has been in development for some time, called Warcraft Chronicles of the Second War, which remakes the game in the same engine as Warcraft 3 Reforged. It's not a one-to-one remake, rather it's an entire reworking of the game to include new heroes, new lore elements, and make the game's story blend well with the established canon. Currently, the Horde campaign is playable, and the Alliance campaign is in development. And literally, announced and released as we record this episode, Warcraft Remastered and Warcraft 2 Remastered, released by Blizzard to celebrate the franchise's 30th anniversary. These are remastered versions of the original games that have higher resolutions, new hand-drawn artwork, the ability to select up to 12 units, and various other quality of life updates, such as the much-needed mouse support in Warcraft Orcs and Humans. So not only can you now right-click to move your characters, you can also double-click to select all units. It's everything you'd hoped for in Warcraft 1.
Nice.
And for those of you who want to play Warcraft Remastered and Warcraft 2 Remastered, you can pick up the Battle Chest. It's on battle.net. It is $40 right now, and it comes with Warcraft Remastered, Warcraft 2 Remastered, and Warcraft 3 Reforged, which just had its 2.0 update, which fixes a lot of the problems people had with Reforged. So hopefully it's pretty much the full package now, and I think a lot of people are excited about it. However, you can pick up the non-remastered versions of Warcraft 1 and 2 from GOG if you just want to play the original DOS versions. Still available, and you can buy them.
I also do like that the Blizzard launcher is called battle.net. I never really acknowledged that. I always just referred to it as the Blizzard launcher because that's what it is.
It is the BattleNet.
Yes, it's the evolution of BattleNet.
Yeah. It is like, if you go to battlenet.com, it just takes you to the Blizzard page.
Should you be able to just go to battle.net?
Yeah, battle.net, I mean.
Wow, battle.net.com. What the heck is that?
What happens if you go to battle.net.com? Oh, it says page not found. Well, that being said, that will be our Warcraft 2 episode. And producer Doug, hopefully this counts. I know he was grumpy that we didn't do a video game episode. We talked about a company last time, but hopefully he's happy because we talked about a video game. Well, let's get into our retro rewind. Seth, do you want to go first?
Zach had me play Young Merlin for the SNES. It was developed by Westwood Studios. Yes, that Westwood Studios. And published by Virgin Games for the SNES back in 1993 in North America and 1994 for the European market. In the game, you play as the titular young Merlin, a young boy with blonde hair from the Arthurian legends. And you help out the Lady of the Lake and you fight an evil Shadow King. In the game, you have your abilities are picking up items and then using said items. Not really casting magic. You find items that may be magical in nature. One early on in the game, you take some crystals and throw them into water, and that spawns things that you can use, like a bag that you can throw to freeze people and a star that you can throw a disappointing distance that explodes. You then walk through the forest and you pick up items and throw items, and there are these trees that look like the tree from Kirby that are so annoying. They just spam explosive balls, and when you get close to them, they throw you, and it is so hard, and it made me so mad. But the rest of the game's pretty good. It's kind of Zelda-y, where you like explore the map, find things, you have to find like a lantern to go into a cave and all that stuff. It plays pretty well. I don't know if there's any lives. I just kept dying over and over again. It just kept restarting me, so that's pretty nice. And there's like a password system, so you can save. The password is a series of like X, Y's, and B's. So you have to write it down. The first time I was presented a password, it was presented without any context, so I thought it was just a command that I had to put in, and that took a little while for me to clear that. But yeah, so overall, I think the game holds up. I think Westwood did a pretty good job of making it, and I think that it still is a good adventure action game that you could play on the SNES if you've already beaten if you've beaten Zelda and you want to play something unique. So check out Young Merlin. Next week, Zach, you could play Dune Dune 2
Cool, I will.
for whatever system you want.
Great, I probably will play the DOS version. Seth had me play Cyborg Justice for the Sega Genesis, developed by Novo Trade and published by Sega in 1993. It is a fighting / beat 'em up game where you customize a robot and you beat up other robots. It sounds great on paper, but it plays bad. I found the controls to be very stiff. Often my character would kind of be in a wind-up state and then get smacked around by the other robot, so I couldn't even land a punch in. Or like by the time I'm actually punching, the other robot is literally just taking one step backwards and I'm missing. It was kind of annoying. I eventually got the hang of what to do, but I don't know. There's better fighting games out there. What's frustrating is that it's a pretty cool idea, right? You get to customize this robot, like different things. You get to like design their arms, so you can have like a saw blade arm or a big hammer or a gun arm or a laser arm. You get to design their body, so you could have a special jump pack or something like that. And then their legs can do different things like somersaults and stuff. So there's all different things you can do to make a robot work the way you want it to. But I just felt like they like had this great idea and just did not make the landing sort of deal. I don't think it holds up. But anyway, next week, Seth, you can play Tony La Russa Baseball for the Sega Genesis.
Nice. I'm looking forward to it. Well, that's going to be our Warcraft episode. We appreciate you listening in on it. As always, we're available wherever podcasts are able to be listened to, whether that's Apple, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher. No, that's closed. Google, that's closed. Anyway, you get the picture. You can also check out our website at classicgamingbrothers.com. There is a blog. We still only have 2 articles. I'm writing a 3rd article. It's getting ready. It's in draft mode. I'm ready to hit submit. And then finally, you can follow us on social medias. We're on Twitch, Instagram, and Facebook at Classic Gaming Brothers. We're on Twitter at CG Brothers Pod, Blue Sky at CG Brothers Pod, and that's going to be it. Don't forget to tell 3 friends that you like us. Anyway, Zach, am I missing anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Zach.
I've been Seth.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.